My name is Diana Myers. I'm 28 now. 15 years ago, when I was only 13, my own parents put me out on the street. Last week, they walked into the reading of my Uncle Harold's will, smiling confidently, flanked by their private lawyer, convinced they were about to inherit millions. But the moment attorney Margaret Morrison opened the sealed envelope and started reading, their expressions collapsed. When she reached Clause 7, my mother, the same woman, who once told me I was no longer her daughter, leapt to her feet, face ashen, mouth open in pure shock. Before I reveal what happened next, if you love stories of accountability, karma, and hard-won boundaries, please give this a like and subscribe, but only if the story actually speaks to you. Where in the world are you tuning in from right now? What time is it where you are? Leave a quick comment and let me know. To explain why my mother reacted the way she did, I have to take you back to the summer of 2010. I was a 13-year-old girl who had already learned that I was the family problem nobody wanted to solve. We lived in a small house in southeast Portland. My father, Richard Myers, was a quiet auto mechanic who almost always sided with my mother. My mother, Sandra, ran the household like a strict manager and worked the register at a local grocery store. My older sister, Tiffany, 2 years ahead of me, had my mother's golden hair, blue eyes, and bright smile. Everyone pointed it out. "Tiffany looks exactly like you did at her age, Sandra," people would say, and my mother would light up. I, on the other hand, took after my late paternal grandmother. Brown hair, brown eyes, reserved nature. Mom never said it was bad. She simply never said much about me, period. The favoritism was visible in every detail. Tiffany's 15th birthday was a big celebration. 15 friends, a fancy 3-layer cake from the best, bakery on Hawthorne, even a rented karaoke machine. 3 months later, my 13th birthday was just the 4 of us at the kitchen table with a discounted grocery store sheet cake. The frosting read, "Happy Birthday," in generic lettering, left over from someone else's order. I didn't fully understand my place until I turned 12. That's when I learned Tiffany had a college savings account that had been receiving regular deposits since she was 5. When I asked my mother why I didn't have one, she answered as if the question was strange. "Tiffany needs it for college. You'll figure something out. You're adaptable." That sentence crystallized everything. I was the backup child. Tolerated, but never invested in. Then came the summer that broke the family apart for good. In April 2010, I secretly applied to the Oregon STEM Summer Academy at Oregon State University, a 6-week residential program for gifted students in math and science. The full scholarship covered tuition, housing, food, and supplies, worth $4,200. I told no one. I'd already learned not to announce good news at home. On May 15th, the acceptance letter arrived. Out of more than 2,000 applicants statewide, I was one of only 50 chosen. For a few hours, I felt seen. That same week, Tiffany learned about an exclusive 3-week performing arts camp in California. No scholarship, cost $3,800. At dinner, my mother announced her decision, as though it were obvious. "Diana, you'll turn down the science program. We can't afford 2 summer activities, and Tiffany's camp will strengthen her college applications." I stared at my plate. Then, quietly but firmly, I said, "No." The room froze. "Excuse me?" My mother's voice dropped to the low, dangerous tone she used on difficult customers. "That scholarship is mine," I said, voice trembling but steady. "I earned it. You can't take it away to give to someone else." She looked at me as though I'd become a completely different person. "If you can't put family first," she said slowly, "then you don't belong in this family." I thought she was just furious. I didn't realize she meant it literally. 3 days later, I returned from the public library to find my clothes, books, and belongings stuffed into 2 trash bags on the front porch. My mother stood in the doorway, arms folded, expression calm and final, like she'd finished an unpleasant but necessary task. "I called Harold," she said. "He's coming to get you. From now on, you're his responsibility." My father stood in the hallway behind her, eyes fixed somewhere else. Tiffany watched from her upstairs window, then stepped out of sight when our eyes met. She didn't come down. I sat on those garbage bags from 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. The porch light never turned on. My mother went inside after 5 minutes. Uncle Harold drove 3 hours through the night from Seattle. When his gray Honda rolled into the driveway, I was still curled up on the bags. He didn't speak at first, just walked over, pulled me into a fierce hug, and whispered, "You have a home now." As we drove north through the dark, I didn't know my parents had already signed legal papers inside the house while I waited alone on the porch. That document would wait 15 years to reappear, and when it did, it would dismantle their last hope. That night, as we drove north through the darkness toward Seattle, I didn't know that my mother had signed a document before Uncle Harold left. I didn't know what it meant. I was just a scared kid staring out the window, wondering what I'd done wrong. It would take 15 years for that document to resurface. And when it did, it would change everything. Uncle Harold's house in Seattle's Ballard neighborhood wasn't large, but it felt enormous compared to the cramped space I'd occupied in my family's home. For the first time in my life, I had a room that was entirely mine. More importantly, I had someone who believed in me. Uncle Harold had built Mears Property Holdings from scratch, a commercial real estate company he'd started with a single small office building he'd purchased after working double shifts for 6 years. By 2010, he owned 8 properties across the Seattle metro area. He never married, never had children. When I arrived on his doorstep with nothing but 2 garbage bags, he didn't just take me in, he invested in me. Over the next 4 years, I poured myself into school. I graduated from Ballard High in 2014 as class valedictorian, president of the math club with a 4.0 unweighted GPA. The University of Washington offered me admission with a partial scholarship to their Foster School of Business. By 2018, I had my bachelor's degree in finance, graduating summa cum laude with a 3.94 GPA. Uncle Harold had given me internship opportunities at Mears Property Holdings starting my sophomore year. I learned the business from the ground up: data entry, lease analysis, tenant relations, property assessments. In 2019, after 18 months at a Big Four-style accounting firm I'll call Mitchell & Partners, I earned my CPA certification. 1 year later, Uncle Harold offered me a position as controller. By 2021, I was CFO. On my 26th birthday, I managed a portfolio of 12 commercial properties with a combined value of $23.7 million. Uncle Harold sent me an email that day. I still have it saved. The subject line read, "To my daughter." The message was simple. You don't need to prove anything to the people who abandoned you, but you do need to prove to yourself that you're worthy. You have. Happy birthday, Diana. In those 15 years, my biological family reached out exactly 3 times. The first was in 2012. My mother called Uncle Harold's phone, not mine, to ask for $5,000. Dad had lost his job at the auto shop. Times were hard. Surely Harold could help his own brother. Uncle Harold declined. He told me about the call afterward, his jaw tight. "They haven't asked about you once," he said. "Not how you're doing in school, not if you're okay. They just want money." The second contact came in 2016. Tiffany mailed me a wedding invitation. No personal note. "No, I hope you're well." Just the formal printed card with my name and Uncle Harold's Seattle address. I didn't attend. I didn't send a gift. I didn't respond at all. The third was in 2020. My mother sent me an email, the first direct contact she'd initiated since throwing me out. The subject line was, "Checking in." The message mentioned that she'd seen an article in Seattle Business Journal about Mears Property Holdings expanding into the East Side market. She hoped I was doing well and suggested we should catch up sometime. I deleted the email without responding. I wasn't holding grudges. I had simply built a life that didn't include them, and I saw no reason to change that. In the summer of 2024, Uncle Harold received a diagnosis that changed everything: congestive heart failure, advanced stage. The doctors gave him 12 to 18 months. He lasted 8. During those final months, Uncle Harold met with his estate attorney multiple times. He updated his will in June 2024, 6 months before he passed. When I asked him about it, he just smiled. "Everything's taken care of," he said. "You focus on the business. I've handled the rest." I didn't know what he'd written. I didn't know about the clauses. I trusted him completely. I had no idea what was coming. Uncle Harold passed away on February 28, 2025. He went peacefully in his sleep at Swedish Medical Center with me holding his hand. 1 week later, on March 7th, I was in my office at Myers Property Holdings when my phone buzzed with an unknown Portland number. I almost didn't answer. Diana. The voice was immediately recognizable. 15 years hadn't changed my mother's particular way of saying my name, like she was tasting something she wasn't sure she wanted to swallow. Sandra. I kept my voice neutral. Not Mom, just her name. A brief pause. I could almost hear her recalibrating. I heard about Harold, she said. I'm so sorry for your loss. I was thinking I should come up for the memorial service. Pay my respects. The memorial was 3 days ago. Another pause. Oh, well, I also heard there's a will reading coming up. Family has a right to attend these things, you know, especially when it involves a brother's estate. There it was. The real reason for the call. How did you find out about the will reading? I have an attorney, Victor Harrington. He made some calls. The name sparked a faint memory. Uncle Harold had mentioned a Victor Harrington once, an attorney he'd consulted years ago and decided not to work with. I spoke to Margaret Morrison, Uncle Harold's estate attorney, the next morning. She confirmed my suspicions. Sandra had hired Victor Harrington to file a claim challenging the will. Their grounds, undue influence, alleging that I had manipulated a sick man in his final months. They were also demanding to attend the will reading as immediate family members of the deceased. I stared at the photo of Uncle Harold on my desk. In the picture, he was smiling, almost like he'd known this would happen, almost like he'd planned for it. Margaret Morrison's office occupied the 47th floor of the Columbia Center, Seattle's tallest building. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, you could see all the way to Mount Rainier on a clear day. March 10th wasn't clear. Rain streaked the glass as Margaret laid out the situation. Victor Harrington filed a formal challenge to the will on behalf of Richard and Sandra Myers, she said, sliding a document across her desk. The claim alleges undue influence. They're arguing that you isolated Harold from his family during his illness and pressured him to change his estate plan. I read through the filing, my stomach tightening with each paragraph. They're demanding 50% of the estate, Margaret continued. Their legal theory is that as Harold's only surviving sibling, Richard should be entitled to inherit under intestacy rules, or at minimum receive a significant share that reflects the natural bonds of brotherhood. Natural bonds? I repeated. Richard and Harold hadn't spoken in 8 years before I came to live with Uncle Harold. Did you know that? Margaret nodded. I'm aware. Harold told me the whole history, but that's not what concerns me about this filing. She pulled out another page from her folder. They don't need to win this case. If this goes to litigation, the estate could be frozen for 12 to 18 months during discovery and trial. Meanwhile, the properties need management. Tenants need attention. Bills need to be paid. A protracted legal battle could cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees and potentially devalue the entire portfolio. So they're betting I'll pay them off to make them go away. That's the strategy, Margaret agreed. It's not unusual in estate disputes. I looked down at the challenge filing. In the section describing our family history, Sandra had written that I had abandoned my family and exploited Harold's loneliness. The woman who threw me out was claiming I abandoned her. Do you have any documentation about your circumstances in 2010? Margaret asked. Anything that establishes what actually happened when you went to live with Harold? Thought back to that night on the porch. The garbage bags, the 4-hour wait, Uncle Harold arriving in the darkness. I was 13, I said. I didn't exactly keep records. Harold did. Margaret was already reaching for her phone. She dialed her assistant and asked for a specific file number from the archives. 20 minutes later, her assistant returned with a yellowed folder. Margaret opened it carefully, scanning the contents. Then she looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Diana, did you know about this? She slid the document across the desk. The header read, Voluntary Relinquishment of Parental Rights and Transfer of Guardianship, dated July 15, 2010. The document stated that Richard James Myers and Sandra Ellen Myers, being of sound mind, voluntarily relinquished all parental rights and responsibilities for their minor daughter Diana Marie Myers and transferred full legal guardianship to Harold Raymond Myers. At the bottom were 4 signatures: my mother's, my father's, Uncle Harold's, and a notary public from King County, Washington. File number 2010, GH5847. They didn't just kick you out, Margaret said quietly. They legally gave you up. They signed away their parental rights. As far as the law is concerned, Sandra and Richard Myers stopped being your parents the moment they signed this document. My hands were trembling. I'd been 13 years old, sitting on a porch in the dark. I had no idea my mother had been signing papers inside the house. What does this mean for their claim? Margaret's expression shifted. It means Richard has no standing to claim inheritance through familial relationship. Legally, he's not your parent. He severed that connection himself in writing with witnesses 15 years ago. Margaret offered me 2 paths forward. Option 1, we negotiate, she said. I reach out to Harrington, explain that their legal position is weaker than they realize, and offer a settlement, $500,000 to $1 million, in exchange for them withdrawing their challenge and signing a waiver of any future claims. It's faster, cleaner, and avoids any public spectacle. And option 2? We proceed with the will reading as scheduled. They've demanded to attend as family members. We let them. Then we present the evidence, the guardianship transfer document, the full history, everything Harold wanted disclosed in the event of a challenge. She paused. Harold anticipated this, Diana. He left specific instructions for how to handle exactly this scenario. He wanted the truth on the record. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room of the house Uncle Harold had left me, staring at the family photos on the mantel. There were pictures of me at every stage. High school graduation, college commencement, the day I got my CPA license, my first day as CFO. In every photo, Uncle Harold was beaming beside me. There were no photos of Richard or Sandra, not one. I thought about Uncle Harold's words from that email years ago. You don't owe them anything, but you owe yourself the truth. At 7 the next morning, I called Margaret. I want the will reading to proceed, I said. No settlement, no buyout. If they want to be present for this, let them. But we're not hiding anything. Are you sure? Once this becomes public? They chose to make this public when they filed their challenge. I'm just respecting their choice. The will reading was scheduled for Friday, March 14, 2025, at 2 p.m. in the Morrison & Associates conference room, 5 days away.